Good evening, everyone. My name is Jeff Vaga. I'm the Director of the London International Development Centre and Technical Advisor to the Global Panel on Agriculture and Food Systems for Nutrition. I'm very pleased to be the MC tonight. We have a number of presentations. I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment, but I'd first like to ask Professor Peter Piot to welcome you on behalf of the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. Peter.
Yeah, I'm here. Yes. Thank you, Jeff, and good evening, everybody. Mr. President, welcome to our school, dear friends. I'm really delighted that our school is hosting this event, this panel event of the panel, and it's something that is very close to my heart, not only because there are well over 1 million undernourished people and then a billion undernourished people, but also because I'm a strong believer in the fact that in order to improve health, we need various sectors working together. Health is not something that is kind of generated by doctors and nurses alone. It's something that requires the effort of individuals, but also various sectors in society, and agriculture is definitely one of them. And when I was head of UNAIDS, I worked a lot with the agriculture sector and people who are involved in food security, because there is this kind of vicious circle of poverty, of malnutrition, undernutrition, food insecurity, and in the case then when I was working in UNAIDS and AIDS itself. And so we were trying to create synergies that are positive synergies instead of the negative synergies. And that's how, particularly through our partners in World Food Programme and others, we did a lot, I think, of integrating HIV and health programs in also in agriculture and food security programs. Our school here has made a particular investment in addressing agriculture, food security, nutrition, and health, and that disconnect. And together with our partners in the London International Development Centre, that's directed by Jeff Wager, and thanks to a major grant from the Liverpool Foundation, the trust, where we now have a Liverpool Centre. I have to read this because for integrative research on agriculture and on health, LSHTM. For me, Syrah is a wine, is a grape that makes excellent wine, but so that's even better. So that's really, for me, one of the big ways of moving health forward is to bring together different sectors, and here we are. I think that this is also one of the unique strengths of the school, and that is that our focus is health, public health, global health, but it's through the work of people from various backgrounds, multiple disciplines, that we're trying to reach that goal. And certainly those working on nutrition and on agriculture have a very important role to play. This global panel is an exciting new initiative, and really looking forward to hear what the proposals are, the recommendations, and particularly how it will influence both our work in countries and in terms of international institutions and bilateral donors. And so I think you have carved out a very important piece of work, but with the leadership of the panel, the membership, I have no doubt that you'll be able to translate the very strong evidence base that we have, although not as strong as we would like to see it, but to translate that into policies and into political action. So welcome again, and good luck with your deliberations and your work. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me tell you a little bit before I make any further introductions about what we're doing tonight. The global panel had its first meeting in the last 2 days. It's just ended a few hours ago at the Russell Hotel. We thought we'd take advantage of that to be able to launch some of the issues and ideas and initial thoughts the panel has about what the problems are and what it's going to do about it. So we have a running order where we're going to hear first a welcome from DFID, who the Gates Foundation have generously funded the panel, and then the co-chairs of the panel, Sir John Bennington and President Kufuor, will be giving topping and tailing a bit in the middle where three of our panel members will give views on the issue of agriculture for improved nutrition. And then we'll be open to questions. Now we're being live streamed, so this is going off around the world, and we're going to be getting questions from the audience and questions from Twitter as well over the live stream. And then following that, we're going to all retire to have a glass of wine and some nibbles downstairs, if you'll join us. So what I'd like to do now is invite Tony Burden, who's the head of Growth and Resilience Department at UK Department for International Development, to give us some words of welcome for the panel. We're very grateful for DFID for the conception of the panel, and of course for inviting us to be involved. So, Tony.
Great, thank you, Jeff. And to thank also the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation for co-funding this panel, and to thank the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine for hosting this launch, and Jeff for all the work you're doing in organising this two-day meeting and the launch here today. When my colleagues Rachel Lambert, just sitting here, and Alan Dangour over there, suggested that we try and put together a global panel of this nature, I thought it was a fantastic idea. How we try and bring research and evidence into public policy making is a really important issue. And then I was worried. We had an event hosted by the Prime Minister in June, the Nutrition for Growth event, and the idea was that we would announce this panel there. And I'm so delighted to say that, we've managed to put together a fantastic panel, and co-chaired by President Kufuor and Sir John Bennington, fantastic and well-known people in these areas, and a brilliant panel, and you'll meet some of them today. And I'm just, really want to thank you so much for, making the time for us on this. And it's great today to see so many people from civil society, from research and academia, and the private sector, because you play a vital role in holding us to account, and in bringing innovation and new ideas, and it's developing that evidence on what works in agriculture, in nutrition, that's really important. The Nutrition for Growth event was a major event. We're very proud to have seen so many governments, donors, private sector companies, research organisations all come together around nutrition and make it a really top political priority, and to back that not just with finance but with country plans and with private sector efforts and energy and new research and innovation. It was fantastic. We know a lot about what works to tackle nutrition. We know a lot about direct interventions, but they're only a small part of the problem. In fact, the bulk of the problem, the burden around undernutrition, can only be tackled by interventions in water and sanitation and hygiene, by approaches like social protection, but particularly in agriculture. And of course, joined up government is a major ingredient as well. So making agriculture work for nutrition is critical to tackling undernutrition, and key to maintaining political commitment. So agriculture drives economic development in many countries, but it's also vital for improving nutrition outcomes. And we need to link the evidence and the research so that we use the right kind of proven technologies and practices, and really to deliver those on the scale required to tackle what is a major problem. So I'm really pleased today that we're going to hear more from the panel on emerging research ideas in agriculture and food systems, and hear more around the sort of policy leadership that we need to tackle nutrition and really make progress. Leadership's really critical, and I think this panel is going to play a key role in the coming years. So thanks for everyone coming tonight.
Before we move on to some presentations from panel members, it occurred to me not everyone here might know who's on the panel. So I thought I'd just run through the membership of the panel. President John Kufuor, former president of Ghana, is one of the co-chairs, as is Sir John Bennington, who I'll be introducing shortly. Jane Karuku, who's the president of the Alliance for a Green Revolution for Africa. Srinath Reddy, who's the president of the Public Health Foundation of India. Emmy Simmons is a board member of Partnership to Cut Hunger and Poverty in Africa. Rhodapis Tumusimi, who's the Commissioner for Rural Economy and Agriculture of the African Union Commission. Mahabub Hussain, who's the Director of BRAC in Bangladesh. Rachel Kite, the Vice President for Sustainable Development at the World Bank. Jose Graciano da Silva, the Director General of the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. And Tony Lake, the Director General of UNICEF. Also, Dr. Akin Adesina, the Honorable Minister of Agriculture for Nigeria, and Mauricio Antonio Lopez, the President of Embrapa in Brazil. So that is the panel. We have some of the panel members here tonight, and I'd like now to introduce John Bennington, one of the panel co-chairs. Many of you will know John. I don't think he needs an introduction to a British audience because he was from 2008 until 2013 the government chief scientific officer. And he is now a senior advisor to the Oxford Martin School and a professor of natural resource management at Oxford University. John.
Well, good evening, everybody. One of the things that I learned about my 5 years as Chief Scientific Advisor was that I was constantly in a situation of talking to audiences who knew vastly more about the subject than I did. There is no change. The people that who share this have the privilege of chairing this panel jointly with John Kufuor know vastly more about this subject than I do. And so this sort of unnatural modesty of those who know me will, I hope, come through to you today. What I want to do is to set the scene. I want to set the scene because I think that all generations have a conceit. That conceit is that they live in the most difficult of times, that the challenges they face are more difficult than those who will succeed them or those who actually preceded them. And actually, I do think, albeit that is a generality, there is a real issue that the early years of the 21st century are going to present completely formidable and hitherto unaddressed problems. So the first thing to say is there's uncertainties, but there are some things that we absolutely know are going to happen. Demography, yes, a bit uncertain, but we are pretty certain that somewhere around 2025 an additional billion people will be on the planet compared with 2009 when we first reached that 7 billion figure. It may be a month or two later than predicted, it may be a little bit out, but it's going to happen. The same thing goes for another major trend in the world, which is urbanization. 2010, the urban population for the first time exceeded the rural, and all extrapolations say that that trend is going to keep up. And the other thing that is actually happening too in the world, which is a good thing, in a sense, is that prosperity is to a degree increasing. These figures are very approximate, but about 1 billion people in the developing world might be classified as middle class by various statistics. And that's growing by about 100 million a year. Now, taken together, so, I think we can all manage the arithmetic, even though it's late at night. We're talking about a doubling in what might be loosely termed middle-class people living in the developing world in 10 years' time. And those are going to dramatically affect the demand for natural resources in the world and the way those can be delivered. And the complicating factor also is climate change, which has big uncertainties, but the one certainty that we do understand from the climate system is that there are time delays in it. So the bizarre weather that we are seeing at the moment is actually determined by the greenhouse gases that were in the atmosphere some 20 years ago. So the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere in the 1990s are what's actually determining our weather now. And a corollary of that, of course, is that with the failure of the international community to cut back on greenhouse gas emissions, it means that a vastly increased amount of greenhouse gas emissions are going to actually affect our climate for the next 20 or 30 years. So these are, in a sense, are the certainties. Taking those certainties into account and thinking about some of the context, we have a massive potential increase in demand on natural resources, looking just 17 years ahead. And these figures, I'll quote them, but of the order of 40% more food's going to be required, something of the 40% more available fresh water, and energy, the demand is massive. And we're looking forward to those as being the context, the difficult situation that the world is facing as we move to think about the key issues of nutrition as well as food supply. And just to give you a flavour for this, the top left-hand graph points to the increase in demand for energy that we have every expectation will happen. The bottom graph comes from work of FAO in terms of standard cereals, and of course cereals are not going to necessarily be the full answer to the problems of malnutrition. And the top right-hand slide points to what is actually, I find, arguably the most frightening picture, which is that we are looking at a 40% deficit in the demand for water with available supply. Of course, I think it's a truism. We're not making any more. We've just got to use it rather better. So that's the sort of context that we're thinking of in terms of how we face the challenges of the 21st century. And it would be okay, in a sense, if we were starting out from a good position. But we're starting out from an appalling position. We have got a little under 1 billion people don't have access to decent water. Land degradation is happening. Poverty, already been alluded to. People are almost 1 billion people living on a dreadfully low wage. And we're seeing issues to do with weather and waste and, of course, hunger. Part of poverty, but also the real problem of diet is there for us. And I think that that's the context that I see this panel trying to address what is an extraordinarily difficult problem, because the malnutrition problem is not going to be solved simply by increasing food production alone. And this is where I move from an area where I'm rather more confident to an area where my colleagues on the panel know far more than I. But I think that we have to recognise that there is an interaction between the agricultural system and the system that is actually going to develop nutrition and adequate and indeed nutrition security for the world's poorest. But also, we have a problem in the sense that this food system itself is rather damaged, because not only are we seeing significant problems of malnutrition, but we're seeing significant problems in terms of obesity and diseases that are related to essentially having a diet that is far from healthy and a big problem. So those are the issues, and these are really very difficult ones. And just to focus for a second, and some of you who are students at this institution may recognise them, because I actually have taken them from an exercise that students have actually been used to, which is looking at some of the real problems worldwide. So stunting. Stunting, a massive issue in terms of the number of children that actually have it. And this is the geographical pattern of stunting. And something like 25% of the children born are being born stunted at the moment. This is a devastating problem. I have to make a terrible joke now. Allow me to make a terrible joke, 'cause this is a gloomy subject. My terrible joke is that John Kafur and I are joint chairs of this, and the idea that I would be talking about stunting with somebody as big as John Kafur is a bit strange. If you've seen him walk in, he's a lot bigger than I am, I can tell you. But stunting is a massive problem. You can see the worldwide problems, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, in Asia, and so on, and in South America. And not just stunting, but we actually have big problems of nutrition with deficiency diseases. The vitamin A deficiency, again, focusing on parts of South Asia, on parts of sub-Saharan Africa, is a real problem to us. And we need to be thinking about how we can actually address this food system. We've got these big challenges of just producing enough calories, but if we actually alter our food production system, our agricultural systems, in certain ways that it purely focuses on calories, it is actually going to exacerbate and present even bigger problems for malnutrition. And that, to an extent, is the way that this panel has been constituted. It's posing problems and trying to answer questions about, can we do something, and can we make recommendations? Can we get malnutrition higher up the agenda, higher up the international agenda, and higher up the research agenda to address these as really important issues? Now, the panel itself, Jeff has alluded to the people who are on it. It was formed as a part of a new commitment in the meeting that was had in June on nutrition for growth. It was founded, and it's always been mentioned, it's partly funded by DFID and by the Gates Foundation. We are an independent group of experts. I wouldn't say that, I'm not sure how influential we are, but we're certainly independent. And having chaired the last 2 days, I would say that strident and difficult would also be an adjective that you could allude to this particular panel. But we've just completed our meeting, so Peter's request that we should indicate our conclusions is slightly premature, and we'll all shuffle our feet because any conclusions are very largely tentative. But we're going to be presenting tonight, and I have some colleagues from the panel who know vastly more about these areas than I do. But I'd just like to end this slightly gloomy presentation saying we really need to be thinking, and in the words of one of the panel members today, we need to be thinking not just about the immediate 10 years, 15 years future. We need to be thinking about our children's children and what sort of world they'll live in. And if we don't address these problems, it will be a difficult world. And just let me focus on what is something I think is really quite startling. Let me think about 3 issues. The first one is climate change. We're not addressing it. There is no way that there is any significant cutback in greenhouse gas emissions over the last 20 years, despite the large amounts of time and money have been spent on trying to get an international agreement. How are we going to deal with that? We need to be thinking about mitigation and adaptation, but I think it's going to be very difficult. In terms of, and we are actually in danger there, because there can be a turning point in the system in which pretty much whatever we do won't really help that much. And as I said, 20 years are already determined. What's up there now is going to determine the next 20 years of the weather we'll receive. The second one is population. We are at the moment on a medium trajectory. The top right, the middle line, is pointing to, as it were, the best expectations. But changes in population, we're going to have another billion by 2025. Unless there is some reaction of human fertility to changes and interventions that are brought in, we could be looking at vastly increased numbers. And those will in turn suggest, as we look out some 27, 37 years away, the sort of problems we're going to see in the middle of the century. So I think we need to be careful not to think about solutions that won't last for several decades. So I did say it was a fairly gloomy presentation, but I think the excitement of working with this panel is that we can think about focusing these general problems into a way which actually is hopefully will make a difference, because there's no doubt that if we don't address malnutrition, humanity will be the poorer for it, and therefore will lack the ability to address these challenges. So thank you for your attention, And I'm going to now turn to my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. Well, John has presented a very clear indication, the context in which the panel is set. And the panel is now challenged to understand better and to help governments and others implement ways by which agriculture can contribute and food systems can contribute to improving nutrition. And the next part of this evening involves some informal presentations from 3 of our panel members on the subject of what is the challenge for agriculture and food systems in doing this. So I'd like to introduce up to the table here Emmy Simmons, Partnership to Cut Hunger and Poverty in Africa, Rhodopis Tumusumi, the Commissioner for Rural Economy and Agriculture at the African Union, and Jane Karuku, the President of the Alliance for the Green Revolution for Africa.
Good evening to you, and it's nice to have you tonight. You know, in Africa, we do recognize the media so much. The African Union, in fact, Constitutive Assembly recognizes the civil society organizations. So we interact with them quite a lot, because we know through them we are able to know that the population of Africa understands what is going on. The co-chair, John, has presented a situation which is, as he was ending, he called it gloomy. But let me say that my remarks are going to focus more on how Africa is poised to understand and also utilize the panel which has been put in place. This panel is timely for us in Africa. I do see an opportunity for us to utilize the output of the panel to move the agenda of Africa in ensuring that at least the population of Africa moves out of the challenges which have been indicated, and which are many. They are documented, and I know you know them. In May this year, African Union marked 50 years of its existence. And as we marked it, we started working on an agenda for the next 50 years. This time, this agenda is open for contributions from all of you. And we'd like to see a situation where Africa is no longer grappling with the challenges which are on the table as we are discussing now. Next year, 2014, is going to be the year of agriculture and food security. The heads of state have already indicated commitment. In fact, Africa is now more ready than before to see how they can tackle all these challenges. It's not only nutrition, but at the moment we are focusing on nutrition because it is so important. We don't want to see a large population of Africa undernourished. And you know, an undernourished society is not productive. In fact, it makes political sense from the perspective of the politicians that it is desirable. It makes economic sense to have a society which is well nourished. African Union has 54 member states, and these member states is an entry point for us to ensure that what the global panel is going to be coming out with is able to reach the grassroots people. That is an opportunity for us. And out of the 54 member states, we have 8 regional economic communities. We call these building blocks, the building blocks of African Union. These we have to ensure that the outputs of what we have been discussing now. We have laid the foundation this evening and the last 2 days, all are taken up by member states. We have a good partnership with the global community. We work very, very closely, actually, with all the other regional blocks, so that we look at the issues which come out of science. We look at, like, for example, FAO is so key for us to work with, but there are many other organizations which we work with to ensure that the issues on the global agenda enter into the processes of African Union. We have a continental program, the Comprehensive Africa Agricultural Development Program. This program, which in short is just CADAP, has got at least the principles. It was put in place by the heads of state. These principles identify the challenges which the continent is faced with. And it is now timely that the outputs of the global panel, of which I am a member, will be used by the CADAP to ensure that the population at the grassroots, through the country investment plans, those 54 I've talked about, are able really to look at the challenges which we believe are very, very critical. We work with other institutions, like Save the Children Fund, in fact, is one of those institutions. They bring out information. We work with many other institutions, organizations. We have think tanks. So we have to ensure that what comes out of the global panel discussions, of which I'm proud to represent Africa on. I know I'm there as an individual, but then I have a constituency behind. And I'm obliged to ensure that what we get actually goes to the ground. Yes, we have women and children, but also we have displaced people who are living in camps. But then the challenges of the climate change, which you have seen John highlighting, are also there. But we have policies and programs. We put in place policies and programs, and the Agenda 2063 is going to underline the importance of making agriculture work for nutrition, because it is a foundation for humanity. I believe that as we move forward in the discussions, in setting the agenda for the global panel, we should be able to ensure that the population of Africa, and of course, since I'm working for the world, the global panel is for the world, the population of the world moves out of that disrespectful position. It's not only, in fact, a stunting, it's not only food insecurity. We have the challenges of, for example, food which is not safe to eat. We must make food very safe to eat. But then we also have a challenge. We have a challenge of where people are becoming maybe bigger than they are supposed to be. And that is, of course, not desirable. And then others are not having enough. Others are seen to be having much more, and yet it is not unhealthy. It is not a healthy situation. So we have to work together globally, regionally, and then at the country level to ensure that we get out of this situation. The institutional framework is available, especially for us in Africa. We are very, very much organized, and Africa now has taken a center stage in the global politics. Economically, it is growing. The challenges are still big, but we have to ensure that these challenges are tackled as we move forward. Thank you.
So I think I'm next after Rhoda. That's not very fortunate. And after John. So I was asked the question, how to make agriculture work for nutrition. And I think I'm going to look at it from my own eyes or from my own lenses. I think right now, the last 2 years, we've never seen agriculture so discussed. So I think we are fortunate. And if we don't do something in the next 2-3 years, I think we will have lost the plot. So we have a very big opportunity. If we think about what we eat, by the time we eat something, which should be the biggest source of our nutrition, it has gone through a lot of stages from genetics in terms of where it was bred, to how it was transported, how it was taken care of on farm, in storage, on transportation, on supermarket, or whatever format that you get your food at. And across that whole chain, we do destroy a lot of nutrients. And if I start from the beginning, if you imagine breeding, we the last few years we've been working on increasing productivity and income growth for farmers. And somehow, the nutrition debate has not been really discussed. I think we are seeing it start now, and I think it's very timely. So we need to make sure, at least through the work of the panel, that nutrition does not get forgotten, and it gets the same attention we get as productivity improvements, as well as income growth for the farmers. So which means that if we are thinking about breeding programs, whether it's a university like this one or research institutions, they have to be involved and look in terms of how do we improve what we are going to grow for the farmer, and addressing all different facets from nutrition, productivity, and income growth. And if I become positive, because I think we need to become positive to get energy to go on, we are seeing a lot of acceptable products, certainly in Africa, like orange fleshed potatoes, the yellow corn, and so on. And also growth of, we're getting back to indigenous vegetables where they're getting attention of the researchers. So a lot of good work is happening, but I must say the caveat, it's not enough. I think we also have to invest in it. We know that we have to keep talking to governments. We can hear governments are starting to talk very well, listening to RODA. But the investment on agriculture, so that we can have good breeding programs for nutrition and productivity, are not where we would like to be. So we also need to keep talking to governments and together so that we can do the proper investments. Secondly, there is also the choice of crops. A lot of what a farmer grows is influenced by a lot of things. It's influenced by what the market demand. It's influenced by sometimes government policy. Sometimes it's also influenced by what is available to them or what they can afford to grow. So I think somehow we have to be clever and have some very clever interventions to influence positively for better income and for better outcome than we have had in the past. Agronomy, I think we've seen some very scary statistics about weather change. So we also should not forget the sustainability of the decisions we make in terms of breeding. Market demand, we've seen urbanization, and unfortunately where a lot of the biggest rate of urbanization is happening to the wrong people. What I mean in the wrong people is the poor people. So this is putting at risk what they are going to consume, which makes it even tougher now to address the nutrition question. So they'll be undernourished because of where they go in terms of price or in terms of what's available to them, and even the state in terms of safety by the time food gets to them. So we do have another challenge of how do we connect now what is well farmed to the market, to the urban person who doesn't have proper infrastructure in terms of either storage and choice. I keep talking choice because choice is sort of across all the facets. So we do have that challenge, and I think we need to be clever at how we get to do this, working with people who are value adding along the chain. I think we are getting more into refined foods, which are not necessarily very nutritious, but they look more sexy, as it were. So how do we work with private sector companies? And private sector, by the way, I mean from the farmer to the small private sector person to the big, large private sector, to make sure that there's some policies or we're encouraging them to make sure that what they deliver to the consumer has good nutrition, either in terms of fortification or in terms of the natural format the food was at. I mean, I think there's a challenge. I don't have an answer, by the way. So somebody's looking at me, yes, go on, and I think I don't have an answer yet. So we do have a challenge on value addition. The biggest other challenge is wasted and spoilage. So across the whole that chain, at harvest, on farm, harvest, storage, selling point, market, home, there's a lot of wastage and spoilage. So we have to start addressing this, and this is driven by policies and investment in terms of infrastructure, of making sure that we invest in the whole of that chain to make sure the integrity of food, the integrity of processes, it stays. Again, I think this morning we had something sad that as a woman who's most disadvantaged. So we have to address the gender question because women are working so hard to grow food for their kids. They sell the good food to the market. They're left with the bad, quote, food, maybe which has aflatoxin and those kind of things. So they're slowly poisoning their kids. So that's a very sad story I think we had this morning. And we have to address that. And through education, through capacity building, through just simply awareness about best practices, which again calls for investment. So if you think about what I'm talking about is that we all as partners need to work together, from research institutions, from government in terms of policy and investment, to private sector for investment and doing the right thing, to CSOs for messaging, for supporting this agenda, to, I think everybody in the room, all of us have to work together because it's a very big agenda which we have all to partner to deliver. I think we can do it. We are starting to see some very good examples, but not enough. So I think in my conclusion is that it can be done. We are seeing some positive. It's not that gloomy. We do see some good things already. We need to scale them up because they're still very small. And I think wherever you are, you need to partner with somebody so we can solve this thing. I think it's solvable. And I think we'd be very proud if we solved it in our generation. And I think that's a call for all of us. Thank you very much.
Given the previous speakers, I've decided to scrap a great deal of my prepared remarks because they've covered the points pretty cogently. The challenges of population, the challenges of urbanization, the challenges of bringing together agriculture and nutrition in an operational way, as I think my colleagues have just said, both at the political level in the African Union and at the operational level, working with agronomists, working with breeders, working with extension agents. I think one of the reasons that I'm so honored and thrilled to be on this panel is that it has such really amazing people from different sectors who are personally engaged and personally committed to making a difference. I started my professional career more than 40 years ago working in northern Nigeria. And I was hired to be part of a farming systems research team. Some of you may remember that ancient history of farming systems research. And at first, the guy who was hiring me kind of looked at me and said, gosh, I didn't know why we would need a woman on our team. And I said, because I'm really proposing to do household economics. And this is an area of northern Nigeria where everyone was Muslim, and women never went outside of their houses, and not one of the male farming systems research team had ever seen a woman. They had never seen a meal being cooked. They have never seen a meal being eaten. And yet, they were very, very concerned with increasing yields, with increasing productivity, with increasing the returns to male labor on the farm. So ultimately, I was accepted on the team, and I think I completed the picture of farming systems research by adding the dimension of consumption and nutrition. And I'm hoping that's what I'm bringing to the panel today. I have spent 30 years in USAID, DFID's companion organization, doing agricultural programming, doing economic growth programming, doing some of the kinds of work that my colleagues here on this panel have taught. But today I'm working actually in doing a lot of work in the US, where people say, gosh, why should we invest in international agriculture? Why should we pay attention to issues like nutrition and poor health? You know, we have so many problems here at home that in fact foreign assistance right now, you know, days of austerity, not such a good idea. But as soon as you sit down and get into a conversation about agriculture, food systems, nutrition, every American sits up and takes notice. And why is that? It's because every day in every home across the US, as well as across the world, people think, what am I going to eat? What's it going to taste like? Is it going to be good for me? Is it something I really want? As mothers, is it going to nourish my child? So I have found that this agenda of agriculture, food systems, and nutrition is an agenda which is deeply shared by everyone. And as soon as the conversation gets going, and as soon as we engage, ideas come forward, commitments come forward, sort of alternative approaches come out. And as I've been working in the US with American farmers over the last few years on a project called AGREE, as well as with the Partnership to Cut Hunger and Poverty in Africa, which is looking at alternative ways of partnering for development, I have found that there are innumerable good ideas about how agriculture can be changed and how agriculture can be influenced to feed into food systems, which address some of the storage problems, which address some of the processing problems, which address some of the fortification opportunities that are going to lead to better nutrition. I think the world still has huge challenges. All the previous speakers have really emphasized that, and I couldn't underscore it more. But I think, as Jane just said, we have a window of opportunity that is open right now for looking at how agriculture systems, agricultural production systems, food systems that transform that agricultural raw commodity into something that people want to eat, and how families and mothers and kids wake up every day to think about what they're going to eat and actually access it and acquire it and improve their health and nutrition. I think this is an agenda that unites us all, and I think it unites us with colleagues not just in Africa, but we had several colleagues from Asia as well. And I think that we're going to be able to put together this wealth of ideas and this political commitment to actually see if we can come up with some new ways of framing the issues, some new ways of addressing the issues, and really mobilizing our networks of partners and constituents to be able to change the way that we look at the future 20 years from now, when the population, as John said, is going to be larger, climate change is going to be more challenging, we are going to face natural resource constraints, particularly for water. And so I think going forward, we really do have a challenge that makes it worth our time. And I know these are busy people. I'm retired, I'm not quite so busy. These are busy people, and they're giving their time to make this process of collaborative action and collaborative planning and collaborative dialogue really move forward. So it's a thrill to be on the panel, and I certainly hope that all of you will join and support and contribute your ideas as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you, panel members. Would you like to remain for where you are, or turn to your seats?
You're the MC.
That's true. So please feel free to stay where you are while we have our last presentation. John Kofi Agyarkum Kufuor was the second president of the Fourth Republic of Ghana from 2001 to 2009, and served as the chairperson of the African Union from 2007 to 2008. We are deeply honored to have President Kufuor as a co-chair of our panel, and he will now give us some initial thoughts coming out of our panel meeting and some personal thoughts on the challenge that we face. President Kufuor.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, when I received the invitation to come and co-chair Sir John Bennington, and on this very important issue of agriculture and food systems being made to work for nutrition, I got a bit nervous because immediately it occurred to me that the subject matter was critically scientific. And I'm by no means a scientist. So I was wondering, should I accept or shouldn't I? But then it came to me very forcefully that I was a politician. That has been my occupation for the past 40 years. And a politician's role should be the advocate, provide advocacy for even the work of technocrats, like scientists, professional, public, and civil servants. So I agreed to come because truly nutrition perhaps holds the key to humanity overcoming the many challenges that lie ahead of us into a future that tends to be painted gloomier and gloomier all the time. If I should follow my friend John, incidentally, I'm also John. The way he's made the presentation tonight, whereas it gave hope, it also, at the same time, gave nervousness. Because how are we going to get the global community to appreciate the urgency of getting it right with nutrition? 2 days we've been at it, yesterday and today, discussing the issue. And the impressions created in me are what I'm trying to relate to you tonight. The problem of improving agriculture and food systems for nutrition truly is a global one. Today, the disconnect between what we grow, produce, and consume and what should be a healthy diet is a problem as much for the United Kingdom as it is for Ghana. All of our food systems are facing problems in delivering nutrition. But in the poorer countries, as we've heard from my sisters who have discussed the issue before you now, the problem really causes nightmares. And the nightmares are generated from the rapid urbanization and the forces of globalization that encompass us everywhere. So we have, in many parts of the developing world, not only undernutrition, but also the epidemic of obesity. Not too long ago, we were made to believe that obesity was perhaps a reflection of development, overeating because they have it all. But now we learn that it also afflicts us, even in the poorer parts of the world. So nutrition is a problem not just for the poor, it's also there for even the advanced. And if we are finding solutions, then the effort should be global. And I believe this is the rationale for the global panel, which I'm privileged because I believe it's history-making to be co-chairing with a very distinguished scientist like Sir John. The panel, within 2 days, and in a way, I felt overworked over the past 2 days. I'm supposed to be in retirement. And when I was coming, I thought perhaps we'd discuss for 2 hours and then I would retire to the comfort of some hotel room, perhaps with a glass of some cool drink by me. No, it didn't prove to be that for me. We started yesterday, I think about 11, and we didn't close till about 6 or so in the evening, with hardly a break. Unfortunately for me, I had an evening engagement that took me to around midnight before I was allowed to go and sleep. I couldn't sleep. I was tossing about because I knew by 7 I should be up to come through London traffic to join the panel to continue the work today. I came in 9, and we've sat, and fortunately, John was so considerate because I told him in the afternoon I couldn't hold my head. I was falling asleep. I said, my friend, let's close early so I'd have an hour's break before I come and face the critical audience such as you. By 4 sharp, he closed the meeting, but I tell you, I rushed to my room I'd been given a draft, but I looked at it and said, the audience I'm going to meet, I should try and make some impact. So I was looking at the draft, and yes, I'm coming to tell you something, but I don't think it's all. I believe you would appreciate that this is just the beginning of a very tough challenge ahead of not only the panel, but of all of us, especially those of you, like I see, who are privileged to be part of the solution-finding society for humanity. So bear with me if I talk like a politician. Politicians' aim really is to advocate for votes normally. And since a politician would be addressing the people generally, politician doesn't tend to be too technical. It's generalism that a politician thrives on. You've heard all the technical talk from Sir John, from Professor Piot, from these sisters here. John said that you should look at my stature. Yes, I don't look stunted, but I tell you, that he's small doesn't mean he's stunted. The brain power is so big. And I think it's the same with these sisters who have worked at the challenge for decades. I'm quite new to the challenge, but I'm convinced that if what I've learned over the short period I've become associated with the panel, I would put it to work among fellow politicians who constitute governments and, say, even minority groups everywhere, and who tend to be the accepted leaders of peoples everywhere. If I can carry the message to them, that message would get translated into the right policies. And when governments are considering agricultural policies, when civil society organizations and the private sector and farmers generally are considering food systems, they would all accept that the bottom line for the effort should be nutrition. If I can help to deliver this message effectively across to the audience I tend to operate in, then I would have served the purpose of my joining the panel. It's not easy, but what the panel has done, we've listed a number of aims and targets. Our first meeting identified several needs to become our objectives, but we've listed 3, which I'm going to read to you. And we believe if we can pursue them efficiently, we would go some way within a short space of 3 years ahead to make the impact globally that we believe should be made. The first of these objectives is to contribute to the generation of and stimulate a stronger evidence base for how agriculture and food systems can improve nutrition. The second is to create a new global understanding of the current role and future potential of agriculture relating to nutritional outcomes. There are many misunderstandings about the relationship between agriculture, food systems, and nutrition that are impeding engagement and collaboration, and there is a need for clear messages and greater public understanding. The third is to stimulate collaborative actions in agriculture and food systems, which will improve diets, nutritional outcomes, and we will also focus on producing challenging policy papers and initiatives, such as the development of toolkits, which will help decision makers at the national and international level to improve their investments in agriculture and food systems for nutrition. Our life as a panel is only 3 years, but in that time, we see many opportunities ahead. The United Nations system will be holding in 2014, next year, its International Congress on Nutrition. We want to influence that. 2014 is the year of agriculture in Africa, and you heard from Rhoda. She happens to be the commissioner for agriculture at the African Union. There too, we believe our panel would make the necessary impact. Unfortunately, the commissioner is also a panel member, so it shouldn't be difficult. Then the year 2015, which ends the first phase of the Global Development Goals Agenda, is also going to see a new effort ahead beyond 2015 for improving the quality of life everywhere. The panel would be working to get the high-level panel organizing the agenda for the post-2015 development goals to center nutrition as the agenda. We believe we talk hunger, we talk poverty, and we talk unemployment now. We hardly talk nutrition. But if the world would appreciate that nutrition maketh the person, if we would appreciate it as a world, that when we eat right, then we become better humans. If we would make nutrition the center of all the challenges ahead of us as the human society, perhaps we would be reducing the challenges by almost 50%, because it's nutrition that engenders health, and it is the healthy person, if it's a baby, that develops the brain properly. If he's a worker or she is a worker, it's the healthy person that is productive. And we've heard that 25% of all babies born are undernourished. Children like that going to school sleep a lot of the time. They can't concentrate on what they are taught. If they grow into a workforce, you can imagine their output would not be efficient. So if we get nutrition right, we get humanity as an effective instrument, factor for development and for growth. And we need such a force to face the huge challenges arising for the population explosion, the urbanization, and a whole lot of things from climate change and so forth and so on. We need this force to be able to meet the challenges forcefully. So I believe we are generally agreed that the bottom line in our agricultural and food systems efforts is really enhanced nutrition. This is what I've gathered so far, and I'm committed to playing the advocate's role for the panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President Kufuor. I'd now like to invite President Kufuor, John Bennington, up to the stage, and Tony Burton as well, to join our panelists for some questions from the audience and from listeners abroad. So what I'd like to do is invite questions, comments. We are a panel that's just started our work, and as you can see, in the very early days, very interested to know what people are thinking and to invite questions and thoughts. I'd like to take several and then let panel members address those as they feel are appropriate to their interests or abilities to answer, and then take some more. And we'll do this a few rounds, and in the middle I'll also ask for any ones that have come through Twitter. So first let me take a few questions. I saw a hand up here.
Hi, my name's Paul Lynch. I'm just an individual who's interested in nutrition, and I was very pleased to know that it's going to be such an important global focus and the power that it can actually bring to the world and changing things. I'd be quite interested just in your views with genetically modified foods. Obviously, that's something there's been studies that have said that actually has health effects. Obviously, there's other studies saying otherwise, obviously. But if nutrition is at the core of what we're doing, and if genetically modified food is going to be part of that, I think we need to be, certain that that's actually going to be helping people rather than being a hindrance. And I suppose in summary, I'd be very interested in just hearing what the table thinks about, where their thoughts on genetically modified foods and how it may help in this nutrition debate as we move forward.
Thank you very much. It's a very clear question. Another question, this lady here, yes, please.
Hi, Rebecca Cantor. I'm now here at the London School and with Sarah. My question is, a lot of the people that still struggle from these nutritional problems in low middle income countries are or were farmers who were forced to urbanize. How do we reconcile this problem, and do we have enough farmers to then also solve the problem of needing more agriculture and agricultural improvements?
Thank you. In the middle at the way back, then, the very middle. Thank you.
My name is Jack Winkler. I'm the Professor of Nutrition Policy at London Metropolitan University. I'd like to expand the first questioner's question a bit more broadly. Jane Caruco mentioned orange flesh sweet potato, which is a non-GM biofortified crop produced by conventional breeding. As well as talking about GM crops, could the panel state its position on biofortified crops, whether produced by conventional breeding or genetic modification?
Thank you. So let me put those questions to the panel as sort of the first round. And who would like to? We have questions about GM foods, also about biofortification, and also a question regarding how are we going to address the agriculture and nutrition problem when so many farmers are being urbanized and becoming part of the urban poor. So who would like to start? John.
Well, this is, as you might imagine, not the first time I've been asked about GM material. And I am loud, verging on the strident about this issue. First of all, to say that it is incredibly important that any form of new organism that is developed by genetic modification should be tested for human health, for ecological effects, and so on. But we live in such a challenging world that the idea that a priori one should ignore this technology, or say a priori that this technology is inappropriate or bad or dangerous, seems to me to be disgraceful. And I do believe we have got to think about safety. We've got to think whether that is health or whether that is ecological. But the idea that we can ignore the development of our understanding of plant and animal genomes and not use it seems to me to be inappropriate. Now, that in terms of the, but people have their beliefs, and we live in a democratic society. But I think that all the evidence points to the fact that certain problems can be solved in a way that is both efficient and safe using GM technology. In terms of biofortification generally, I think that there is a genuine issue, and Jane and others would know more about this than me, is whether in fact it is appropriate to deal with malnutrition via supplements, whether that is really the sensible way to go, or whether one should be thinking about an agricultural system that actually produces better quality food, whether by biofortification technology, essentially conventional but enhanced plant breeding, or by GM technology. And I certainly think that the answers are something that we should explore. It is a possibility to be thinking about essentially supplements, but I honestly don't believe that is a sustainable or long-term answer to what is going to be an increasing problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Emmy, would you like to comment?
Actually, I do have a comment on the GM. The comment that Sir John Bennington just made is that often we forget that, in fact, there are many, many other commodities that provide for a diverse nutritional and nutritionally enhanced diet. It's not just about biofortification of staples, which is often a focus, but as Jane mentioned, consumption of vegetables, consumption of fruit, consumption of animal source food. But I did want to remark on the question with regard to farmers being forced to urbanize. And just note that, in fact, it's important to realize that many, many poor rural households are net consumers, net buyers of food, that they actually don't produce enough for their family already. So they are already working in off-farm jobs in many cases. And urbanization in some cases is just an additional step, becoming more of an off-farm employment, seeking more off-farm employment. It's also, I think, important to note that in many countries, the available land resource available to smallholder farmers is not sufficient to actually allow them, even with very intensive production, to gain the kinds of incomes that they need. And so some accommodation needs to be made for the farm sizes to increase, for different technologies and different techniques of farming to be used, and hopefully with education for some of the kids of those farmers to move off into off-farm jobs and perhaps urban jobs. So I'm not sure that I think we're all looking at this transition and transformation and realizing that it should not be farmers forced off their farms, but I think opportunities for farmers and for the children of farmers to move off farm is not a bad thing.
Jane and Rhoda.
Yeah, I think we have enough technology on shelf to actually resolve this issue. And the examples I gave, like the orange-fleshed potatoes, but you find them not widely consumed, for example. So even unleashing that information to the populace would be important. The other one is even what are we consuming right now? We've sort of moved from, certainly in Africa, from what traditionally we used to consume, full of vegetables and traditional crops, to just maize meal. So even simple things like that can bring back nutrition very fast-tracked. I think the other one on value addition, I think we probably are not so sensitive in terms of how much we destroy foods when we are processing. So as the population starts to eat a lot of processed foods, you probably are giving up your jams and, let's say, like maize jams and husks to just the pure starch. So there's enough we can do even on already what we know, but we just need to unleash the habit back, what we used to have. And then you need politicians and you need a lot of CSOs for these education processes. So I think we can do a lot and overcome this even with what we have. But that does not ignore discussions for future.
Rhoda, please. Sorry. And then John.
Let me talk about urbanization. And I'd like to say that urbanization can be a challenge, but at the same time it's an opportunity. Because there are some countries which produce but have no markets. In fact, that's why you find that countries are in WTO negotiating for markets and all that. But urbanization provides an opportunity for markets, for supermarkets to come up. So by moving into town, as long as there is proper planning for the cities, then the rural areas are put into production, and then the markets are within Africa. In fact, it helps promoting regional trade, and also it helps to promote intracontinental trade. So it's not only, it shouldn't be looked at as a challenge only, but it provides an opportunity for job creation, for even agro-processing, as you get a market which is in one area, and it is able to provide really as an outlet for the rural areas. So this is not an area which we need to focus on only on challenges, but we need to focus on it as an opportunity for young people. Then there is increasing population also. John raised it earlier on, but also that increasing population will help us to see an educated class, as long as we create opportunities in the rural areas where the educated class is able to go into agricultural production. Because at the moment, there is at least an old age. You find the old people are the ones in agriculture and the young people are in town. But as long as technologies are now used to attract the young generation, then you find that the young generation is producing for the urban people. And then you find that there is this rural-urban market linkage, which is extremely important for a number of opportunities for the countries.
Thank you. Thank you. John.
Talk of forcing people into urbanization, I believe, overlooks the fact of history. All over the world, urbanization, I believe, has been the factor with societies in transition. Not too long ago, perhaps more people, even here in Britain or Europe, lived in the rural parts than in the cities. But now I believe the reverse is the truth. We see the same in the United States, and it's happening in China. In Africa, it's happening, perhaps faster, because through ICT we see whatever is happening everywhere. And the educated youth would be hard convinced to remain in the rural parts unless he sees real gain in going to the land with his parents. They all want to move into the urban areas. This is introducing rapidly new economic systems. So I would think pragmatism should be the order of the day and into the future. Science and technology in doing agriculture wouldn't need all that many hands on the land. But same science and technology leading to setting up of industrial plants and so forth and so on would need the labor, even if it's in the urban areas. And then, of course, sound socioeconomic governance would be the key to satisfying the people, whether they are in cities or they are in rural parts, to improve the quality of life. That is the objective, or should be the objective everywhere. So I believe the problem shouldn't be put as simply as people being forced out of land, their farms, into the urban areas. We should take a holistic view of the trend of history.
Thank you. Another round of questions. Question here, please. Speak. Yeah, great. Thanks.
My name is Charlie Romsby. I'm from the London School of Economics. It's a question around sustainability, really. I wondered what economic policy models you'd be advocating. I mean, just some of the cases that I've read, diversification of crops and produce doesn't really go hand in hand with like a neoliberal economic model of choosing your cash crop, for instance. So I'd like to, put to the panel, have you thought about what economic models you'll be advocating? And second of all, inequality plays a big part in people having access to good nutritional food. And price obviously is going to be a large factor here. What will you be advocating policy-wise to ensure that food is not only affordable but is accessible to the poorest of the poor?
Thank you. Another question up here, please.
Sabrina D'Souza from Results UK. I work on nutrition advocacy. The discussions here have been very much food-focused, talking about orange flesh sweet potatoes, about the process of how we lose micronutrients from farming to transport. But we know that undernutrition is so much more than just food. In some areas, up to 50% of child undernutrition is actually caused by diarrhea from poor access to water and sanitation. And while it's very well and good increasing the diversity and the nutritional value of food through agriculture, I want to know what how the panel is going to also incorporate WASH into this to make sure that agriculture for nutrition has the biggest nutritional impacts as possible.
Thank you. And one last question down here, please.
Thank you. Hugh Bagdon-Lakely, Save the Children. Biodiversity agricultural biodiversity is quite a serious issue. There's staple crops tend to dominate. So obviously in Kenya you have maize and ugali, Malawi it's still maize and nsima, but in Uganda it's obviously plantain and matoke. And the diet is dominated by these staple crops. So how do you reverse this trend, going towards some more diverse crops such as the legumes? But with legumes, one of the big problems we've got with legumes is the lack of seed, certainly certified seed. I'd be interested to hear the panel's views on that. Thank you.
I'm going to take one more question because I'm encouraged that this might be our last round of questions, and I'm going to take one from Twitter. We've got a number that have come through. Catherine, would you like to give me one?
Yeah.
You want a microphone there. Great, thanks.
Yes, this is one from the Global Network. Neglected tropical diseases could undermine efforts to improve nutrition. Does the Global Panel plan to address neglected tropical diseases?
Okay, so neglected tropical diseases. Staple crops, the access to other kinds of crops, seeds and otherwise. Undernutrition is more than just about food. And the economic dimensions, prices, and how the panel might tackle that. Who'd like to have a go at least one of those questions?
You should go. You know more about this than me. I nominate Rhoda. John,
I
you
feel
go.
put on the spot because I happen to be the special envoy for the Global Network on neglected tropical diseases. we talked through 2 days and we didn't address the issue of neglected tropical disease. But no doubt in practice, I'm sure the panel would get to it. In the sense that the diseases, the neglected tropical diseases, I believe are all water and contaminated soil borne. When you talk polluted water and contaminated soils, in many places we are talking of the rural parts. And if agriculture is going to be improved, naturally policy should look at how to fight the neglected tropical diseases, which are the worms that tend to afflict people, the various worms in the main, whether it's hookworm, river blindness, and all the things that incapacitate poor farmers and rural communities everywhere. In Ghana, for instance, in my time as president, we were listed as some of the most endemic countries in the world for guinea worms. And so my government was challenged to find ways to reduce the worms, because when they attack, farmers are so incapacitated, perhaps half a year they wouldn't be able to go to their farms. School children are not able to go to school. Even when they go to sleep. So government had to adopt a policy to provide potable water. The most endemic area was in the north of the country, and government put in place waterworks that cost about $40 million US dollars. Then for a struggling country, that was a lot of investment. Within the 8-year period that my government was in power, we reduce this threat, and now Ghana is listed as having eradicated guinea worm altogether. It's one of them. So if we want to make agriculture productive for nutrition, we have to look at neglected tropical diseases. I should also add that I happen to also chair the sanitation and water for I don't know, into retirement I find I'm getting more offers for jobs. So I'm also chair of that, and sanitation naturally is critical, but when you talk sanitation it could be urban, because we find that with the rapid urbanization, governments in the poorer parts of the world are not able to plan abreast with the urbanization. And so we have slummy areas mushrooming all over the place. And then the utilities are not planned into these urban slummy areas. And what happens? Again, spread of diseases of all sorts. And again, people are reduced in efficiency as factors of production. So truly, even as we are tackling agriculture and food systems for nutrition, we have no choice, no alternative, but also to look at wash and neglected tropical diseases. Thank you.
Thank you. Rhoda.
Well, as we were discussing for the last 2 days, we did recognize that nutrition is a factor of a number of areas, and it's not only agriculture, and that is why, in fact, we have the agriculture and food systems. The food systems refers to a number of areas. So the nexus between health and agriculture, then water, then you find that even education. So there are many other areas which contribute to nutrition. So the discussions we had really focused on how we are going to tap, or how we are going to see all the different sectors coordinated better in order to attain what we would call maybe adequate or good nutrition. So building on what President John Kufuor has said, I would like to say that yes, following on the question which has been asked, how we are going to handle this water and sanitation, the issues of sustainability and the staple food and all that, we recognize that there are many areas we have to look at if we have really to deliver better. Now, there was a question on related to the different economic models, if we have to have sustainability of agriculture contributing to nutrition. Yes, we are no longer promoting diversification, but we are looking at what is it that can deliver better for the people of developing economies, especially because that's where we have less food at the moment. We are looking at, we have, for example, the Comprehensive Africa Agricultural Development Program. And this, very many partners do sign on. The civil society organizations sign on, the development partners sign on, the ministries of health, of agriculture, of economic affairs, planning, then institutions and organizations like the FAO, they all sign on onto what priorities should be put in place. That is what undercut what we do. So we look at the right priority for the country as far as availing food. So this is what we are going to use as an entry point to see what is it that we can undertake as far as nutrition is concerned. But our part as panels, as members of the panel, we are going to provide, say, credible information. This one is happening. This can be done better like this one, because at the grassroots level, it is the country. or the responsible leadership at the country, which has to put those policies into place. We have to say, what is the yardstick? What are the tools? That's what the president talked about on the index, for example, indexing. We provide information, we provide tools, we just say, where are we on this one? Results framework, where are the results? It has been like this, where have we reached now? This is what we want to see, maybe improve, and it may help in really re-engineering the policies, dynamizing the processes which the countries are already in.
Thank you. Any other comments from the panel? John?
Yeah, when dinosaurs roamed the earth, I was at the London School of Economics. Your question is a very good one, and I think the honest answer to it is don't know. But I think there are some things then that I think we need to be pondering about, the way that really we need to be thinking about managing agricultural systems so they don't do any harm to nutrition. So, for example, most of the research money is going into some of the major cereals, and we are actually seeing a way in which essentially material that does not provide particularly good nutrition is actually coming in cheaper and cheaper, whereas material that actually provides good nutrition is becoming dearer and dearer. And there are various ways that one can think about regulation, one can think about taxation, but you can also think about actually thinking about putting investment into researching, for example, more nutritious crops, which hopefully, by increasing productivity, will drop them. There's no simple answer. We're not just going to turn over the economic system of the world to address it. But I think what one can think about is to actually thinking about the sort of interventions that are actually made and can be made, which would actually improve things, and certainly to mean that they don't do harm. And I think that one of the worries that I see, and I think we've addressed it in part in some discussions, and these are early days, are that, for example, to address GDP issues, to address actual poverty issues, one may be encouraging an agricultural system which actually is undermining the nutrition of the poorest. So I think these are the sort of interventions. We do not have the final solution, as it were, but I think that recognizing these are issues is really important. But the honest answer to your question is don't know.
Okay. Thank you.
There was
Jane,
the last
please.
one on beans and
Okay.
the seed systems, so I'll try and answer that.
Thank you.
I think we know that the reason beans are not as good, let's say, as maize in terms of the seed production is because the farmers are able to use their land races, and they don't necessarily buy afresh. So do we know what we are going to do to encourage them? I think the honest answer is no. And that's why we are looking to draw on a lot of experiences to look at working models which we can spread around. But it's an important topic that we do have to address. How do we bring back nutrition and make it profitable for the players so that it can be sustainable, either at the farmer level or at the private sector, SME level, who propagate these kind of seed systems.
Well, thank you. I think that should concludes our question session. I'd like to thank our panelists and you for your questions as well, and a round of applause. If you're interested in what's come out of this event, there will be a video and audio record of this meeting will be on the London International Development website shortly. The global panel website itself will be launched soon. You'll be able to find more information on panel plans there. You can sign up to the mailing list for updates and follow us on Twitter already through, I believe, the LIDC website. Is that right? Yes, so if you go to LIDC. So thank you very much for your discussion. Look forward to talking to you now informally.